Hello everyone, Teacher Martin here, and today I want to read you a fairy tale. But not any fairy tale, not a fairy tale with kings and queens and knights and princesses and animals that talk. I want to read you a fairy tale that's going to scare you. And this fairy tale is about witches and lost children, and it's called Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel was written by the Brothers Grimm, and the Brothers Grimm were very famous for writing fairy tales made for scaring children, and I hope this one scares you a little bit today. Now, as we're reading the story, I want you to think about some of the moral lessons that you can learn from Hansel and Gretel. So what are some of the lessons that you can learn and think about in your daily lives? Okay, let's get started with Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, in a faraway forest, there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife and their 2 young children. The boy's name was Hansel and the girl was called Gretel. The woodcutter was so poor that the family had very little food to eat. So one night, the woodcutter's wife said, "We cannot take care of the children anymore. You must take them to the middle of the forest and leave them there." The 2 children heard their parents talk, and when they were very scared, they said, "We don't want to live in the forest," they said to each other. So the clever children came up with a plan to save themselves. That night, they quietly filled their pockets with tiny pebbles. The next morning, as the woodcutter took them to the middle of the forest to leave them there, Hansel and Gretel dropped the pebbles along the way behind them. When their father left them all alone, all they had to do was follow the line of pebbles back home. The woodcutter and his wife were surprised to see the children back home. "We must take them again tomorrow," they said. Hansel and Gretel were very worried now. "All our pebbles are gone. What do we do now?" they cried. "I have an idea," said Hansel. "We can drop breadcrumbs this time." So, the next morning, when the woodcutter took the children deep inside the forest to leave them there again, the children dropped crumbs of bread along the way behind them so they can find their way back home. But sadly for the children, they didn't realize that the birds and animals would eat them and had eaten all the crumbs. Now Hansel and Gretel walked and walked through the forest, but they could not find their way back home. Suddenly, hidden in the deep dark forest through the trees, they saw a strange house. But the house was made of candy, cookies, chocolate, and everything delicious. You could eat the house. "This is a gingerbread house," cried Gretel happily. The children were so hungry that they started gobbling up the house all at once. Now, this house actually belonged to an old witch who loved to eat little children. Just as Hansel and Gretel were eating her yummy dough, she pounced on them and locked them inside. "I shall fatten you up and eat you," she said with a wicked laugh. The wicked witch locked Hansel in a cage. Then she turned to Gretel and said, "You little girl, help me light the oven." Oh, what would she use the oven for? "When it's hot, I shall cook your brother and eat him up." Oh my God. Poor Gretel was so afraid. Gretel quickly thought of a plan to save her brother. Just as the witch bent to check if the oven was hot, she gave her a big push from behind. The witch fell into the oven with a scream and Gretel quickly locked the oven door with the witch inside. Gretel rescued Hansel, and the two children filled their pockets with all the witch's riches and jewels. Finally, they managed to find their way back home and give all their jewels to their mother and father, who were obviously very sorry and remorseful for what they had done. And thanks to the clever children, the woodcutter and his family were never poor or hungry ever again. The end. And there you go. That was the story of Hansel and Gretel and how they managed to escape the witch's grasp. So, I hope you enjoyed this story. And just don't forget about the story. I want you to think about those moral lessons. What can you learn from their situation? And also, what would you have done if you were in Hansel and Gretel's situation? Would you have entered the house? Would you have eaten the gingerbread? And would you have put yourself in that position? Thank you very much for listening to the story. I'm Teacher Martin, and I hope to see you again sometime soon. Bye-bye. Take care.